For a psychoanalyst, roughly speaking, you're a collection of loosely integrated spirits. That's one way of thinking about it, or subpersonalities. You're not a unity. And those subpersonalities have their basis in, well, in all sorts of things. They might have their basis in past, especially traumatic experience, or in patterns of socialization that characterized your family, but they might also have their basis in fundamental biological motivational systems. So, for example, a psychoanalyst would conceptualize anger or perhaps sexual attraction as a subpersonality. And the reason for that is that, well, you know what it's like when you get angry? You get angry at someone you love, and, first of all, you know, at some level, you're wishing harm. Now, that might only be that you want to win the argument, and you want them to be nicely crushed while you do it. But so there's a desire that comes along with the anger. But there's a lot of other things that happen, too. So, for example, if someone's annoying you, even if you love them, the probability that at that moment you're going to be able to easily access all the memories you have about how annoying they are and have difficult time accessing the memories about how wonderful they've been to you is quite high. And you know that because sometimes you get angry with someone, you have an argument with them, and you sort of clue in later, you snap out of your more or less possessed state, and you think, yeah, well, I really wasn't taking the context into mind, and I was kind of harsh. So then you think, well, who's in control? And that's the question the psychoanalysts are really interested in, and their answer is, it's not generally you. And so it's very terrifying reading in some sense, because, people like to think of themselves as masters of their own house, so to speak, and it's only vaguely true. And, people, you know that too, because you make maybe New Year's Eve, what do you call those? Resolutions, how you're going to be a better person. I think one of the most common ones is, man, you're going to hit the gym 3 times a week. It's like, no, you're not, actually. And so very few people do, and that's partly because, well, it's hard, and so you don't want to do hard things, and the reason for that is because they're hard, so it doesn't take much explanation. But it's also because you can't just tell yourself what to do. And that's annoying too, because life would be a lot easier if you could just say, okay, well, sit down, study for 2 hours, don't watch cats on YouTube or whatever it is that you're watching. And no, that isn't what happens. You sit there and you study for a while, and then, you're thinking about cats, and the next thing you know, you're watching Haunted Mansions in London or some damn thing. And it's a scary idea in some sense, because if you think, well, if you're not really master of your own house, if you don't have yourself under full voluntary control, and you certainly don't, then what does? And Freud is interesting in that regard, because he really talked about the motive power of fundamental motivational systems. Mostly for Freud, it was aggression and sexuality, and those are big motivators. Let's make no mistake about it. And so he thought of you as the conscious part of your personality, maybe as it's like the captain of a ship with a very unruly crew. It's a nice metaphor because, of course, a ship's on the ocean, and the ocean can be very stormy, and so you can only sort of plot your course, and you have to work with what's thrown at you. And then the unruly crew is, well, it's all your drives. Drives is the wrong way of thinking about it. I like the psychoanalytic notion of subpersonality, because a subpersonality has a viewpoint. There's things it wants and it plans. So it's a living entity. It's not some dead cognitive system. So Freud was interested, in some sense, more about, I would say, the biological underpinnings of the subpersonalities. Because he was quite biologically oriented, and he realized that sexuality and aggression were very fundamental subpersonalities. And then there's Jung, and Jung is much more terrifying than Freud, which is really saying a lot, because Freud's quite terrifying. But Jung, he's just terrifying beyond belief. And, for Jung, the subpersonalities that make you up are thousands and thousands of years old. They're cultural constructions that are thousands and thousands of years old. And they have you in their grip. So for Jung, for example, one of the things he said, and I don't remember where it was, I love this phrase, it's so true. And you can think about this for like 5 years, and you can still think about it after that. One of the things Jung said was that people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. And that's really something to think about, because, just think about your own situation. So no doubt you have political views, and you think, I have political views. It's like, well, no, you don't, because you share them with a lot of other people. So they're certainly not yours. And not only that, they've had a very lengthy historical development far before you ever showed up, so they're rooted right at the depths of your culture, but then of course they've been elaborated by one philosopher or another extensively over the last 200 or 300 years, and there's this whole system of thought, and poof, it inhabits your brain, and then you think, well, I've got political views. It's like, no, the political views have you. And that's a very salutary thought, because it's one of the ways to stop yourself from being possessed, because people get possessed all the time by ideas, right? That's what happened in Nazi Germany. That's what happened in the Soviet Union. It happens everywhere all the time. And you might think, well, possessed is a little strong, but no, it's not, actually. It's a very nice, it's a metaphor, obviously, but it's the right kind of metaphor, because a body of ideas, like political ideas, they're a living thing, They're not some dead, dusty words on a bookshelf somewhere. They're an integral part of a dynamic society, and the motive force those ideas have motivates you. You're in their grip. And so you can tell when you're talking to someone who's completely possessed by an idea system or an ideological system, because they'll just bore you to death unless you happen to believe exactly the same thing. So they'll spout out a few of their fundamental belief axioms, and then you can identify which system they're part of, and then they just speak in cliches from that point onward, and you can predict everything they're going to say if you know the axioms of the system. So it's very non-authentic speech. And that would be a way that, say, someone like Rogers or Abraham Maslow, who were humanists of the 1960s, might talk about it, because the person isn't speaking from the depths of their own experience or from even their embodied knowledge. They're just mouthpieces for abstract ideas. And so it's very frightening to realize the extent to which you can be the mouthpiece for abstract ideas, And it's actually one of the dangers of becoming educated, especially in a mass system like the university system, because a lot of what happens to you when you come to university is that you're fed a set of pre-digested ideas. I suppose that's one way of thinking about it, And it's very easy for you to think, well, that those are now your ideas. They're not. They're not. Lots of ideas you have to earn. And if it's a great idea, then you really have to earn it. Because why should you just be able to come along and pluck up a great idea? That's not how things work. You have to earn things that are valuable. So anyways, the depth psychologists, man, they're so good at that. It's lovely to read them. And the problem, too, is with a lot of the people we're going to talk about, it's very difficult to summarize their work. Because often the devil's in the details. So, you might look at someone like Piaget is a good example, the constructivist that we talked about briefly. Man, the guy wrote dozens of books. You can't just summarize those suckers. It's not one coherent theory that you can boil down to, 10 axioms, and then you can read it while you're flying from Toronto to Montreal, and poof, you're a Piagetian psychologist. It doesn't work like that. The people who formulated these theories were extremely intelligent, and they were often great writers. And so a lot of the knowledge is actually in the writing itself and not in what you can extract out from the gist, And most of the theorists, Freud, Jung it's harder, but Freud, Rogers, people like that, you can extract out the gist of their theories, and then you can, what would you say? You can stereotype it, or you can caricature it, and then you can point out how your caricature is absurd, and then you can feel like you're even smarter than Freud. And, you're not. So it's not a good idea. And so these people should also be approached with respect, because, man, they have so much to tell you. It's so useful. Okay, so we talked about the depth psychologists. We talked about the constructivists. We didn't talk about the humanists and the existentialists and the phenomenologists. It's a mouthful of words, So let's put a little bit of foundation under those. So if you're a humanist, to be a humanist means really to be a creature of the Enlightenment. And a humanist thought, in some sense, at least this is what the humanists think, they think of it as post-religious. And they think of humanistic thought as putting the value of the human being at the center of the cosmos in some sense, valuing the person as they are, and then also valuing the person that they could be. And promoting the pathways of development that would allow people to become what they could be as creatures that are valuable in their own right.